Joining us today is Paul Braren of Tinker Try. He is a 30-year veteran of the IT wars, having seen many, many things. Just got to know him a little bit on LinkedIn and thought he would be a great conversation to have in our ConnectToWork podcast series. So thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So what moment in your career has taught you the most?
So there's one customer where we got kicked to the curb, and I take the blame largely because we were in a rush. So explaining a little more, this is in Manhattan at a university, and you have a bunch of grad student learning from me, being a consultant, paid hourly, to work there for a week. And you got the professor who got the funding for the whole project. So I realized I was in above my head on one portion of the project. So on a Tuesday, I called my manager and said, hey, I've been here Monday, went well, Tuesday went well. Wednesday, I'm going to be in above my head. Can you send someone else in? That other person was sent in. I didn't really know that person well enough or vet them too well. And they managed to inadvertently not have the social skill to avoid accidentally insulting the professor. And in my first 6 years of consulting, that's the only time I got kicked to the curb. So by lunch, we got a call saying, yeah, you guys don't need to go back to that facility. Head on home. No. That hurt. But I never wanted it to happen again. And I realized, I should have been more thoughtful in my strategy on handling that crazy week. And it bit me hard and hurt bad.
Absolutely. It's amazing how that bite will always teach you something. So it's important that you learn from it. That's great.
Yep. And it's not to go solo forever. No, you can't learn everything. It's just be thoughtful in your approach and set yourself up to succeed with making sure that people you have the right, not just technical skills, but people skills. And that's where I went horribly wrong.
Right. Well, that leads us into the next question. Paul, when your colleagues or friends speak about you, what are some things that they say? Like three, lovely things they say.
One that sticks out for me, I think it might be hinted at in one of my LinkedIn comments, was something like, Paul answers questions I didn't even know I had yet. And it's almost an insult because, he's pretty long-winded. But it's okay. There's worse things you could be called. So the general theme, though, that I'm proud of would be thoughtful, detail-oriented would be another way to word that. I tend to document it and type quickly and document things thoroughly. And finally, hopefully cheerful, ethical. Those are the kinds of words that I'm proud of being called.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding. Outside of your professional achievements, what passion project or personal interest has taught you skills that make you better at what you do?
Okay, so the whole...
Public speaking is not mine, but
Yeah, for the IT profession, public speaking became more and more part of it in the last decade or so. And that led me to be a little more involved with kind of EV and sustainability advocacy. Politics I know absolutely nothing about. I had to learn the hard way in some of it, like just to make it easier to actually buy an EV in Connecticut. Getting that done is not easy. It's not technical at all. So the skills of taking nice photos and running social media and making some YouTube videos, those lent themselves pretty well, and they were just the start. But I've also learned the hard way that there's so much more in life that I have a lot to learn about. And it's not exactly easy for people to get a car, get it easily maintained at a local repair shop, get a handle on their electric bills, as they see their electric bills go up and up here in Connecticut. These are not easy solutions, but the fun part for me, though, has been the learning. It's just a whole different industry that I knew almost nothing about until I've done 100,000 miles over the last 6 years in an EV. And that's where I dive in hard on things, and that I've quite enjoyed, including how difficult it is to move away from fossil fuels to run your home here in New England and go over all electric, which I've now successfully done, but I have my bruises and scrapes from that process. Yeah.
Well, we all wind up with some bruises and scrapes. But how about, could you tell us about a mentor that's been helpful to you? Personal, professional, whichever.
So I've worked at some huge companies, IT companies. One of them, the mentor was totally outside of my division, a good start. When your company has over 100,000 employees, that's pretty easy to do. But also, he really took it seriously, and he was a good 10, 20 years further along in his career than me. So me, about 15 years into my career, he's, look, broaden your sphere of influence. Sounds like you like to write, you like helping coworkers, you're helping a few dozen people. There's 100,000 employees here, you're helping some of them too, but what about the rest of the world? And he got me thinking, when a year later, that company took down everything I'd written, I spent hundreds of internal hours on a bunch of documentation that just went poof one day because someone didn't want to pay a bill. It was soul crushing, and that's what motivated me to start TinkerTry.com 14 years ago. Nobody's going to take this away. Just going to run it. This content's out there. Google it, scrape it, whatever. and nowadays AI, I suppose. That mentor, he was right. He was saying, make yourself hireable by other companies. Look at yourself and your family as your customer, not just the company you work for and representing them, because it could end at any time. And he was correct. So that thoughtful process of getting to know people outside of the little group I was working with for a decade, that made me very vulnerable had I been laid off at that time. I really appreciate his wisdom.
Do you want to name him?
No, I probably shouldn't, but yeah, I'm proud of the companies I worked at. If you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see everything. My life's an open book. But no,
Right.
yeah, he did not give permission for that, and that's okay.
Okay.
But
That's wonderful. No problem. What book or podcast has influenced you?
okay, so we had an environmental event about how to make Connecticut's air a little cleaner by going greener in our pass-through state, a lot of traffic and cars. Volunteered to drive a person who was a guest speaker at that to the airport, and ended up being Chris Nelder, a rather well-known podcaster who does the Energy Transition Show. Drove him to the airport, got him there in time because his Uber was late and he was looking nervous, looking at his watch. So that was a moment that my shyness of the past, I knew I needed to ditch that forever. I took advantage of seeing him there, thinking, oh, I can drive him to the airport, and had a wonderful 22-minute conversation on the way to Bradley Airport that led to listening to this podcast, subscribing for years now. He's amazing. So basically showing the world that replacing fossil fuels with far more efficient electricity from solar and wind is way less daunting than it appears to most. You really only need about a third the energy because it's just so much more efficient than fossil fuel in the way it's produced and made and all that. It's a hopeful podcast. Rather than doom and gloom and things are spiraling, it's the other way around, that actually we're heading in a much better direction, and it's this hockey stick. We're at the start of that curve and it could get sharper. So I like listening to stuff like that rather than just throw your hands up and give up. He teaches me a lot. And it's also a little bit about how the world works and how these industries and how the fossil fuel world plays pretty dirty on their tricks to have us delay. I've been hearing ever since the 90s, and people like Carl Sagan warning about the environment. Now finally you're seeing things happen. And I can't believe how many decades it's taken for us to wake up. But that would be a very influential podcast that I listen to every week, the Energy Transition Show.
Okay, great. We'll have to give that a listen ourselves. If you could spend a day learning from anyone, historical, live, dead, whatever, whom would that be and why?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of tech heroes flame out or gets pretty ugly at the end of their careers. You become a billionaire. So one guy that seems to buck that trend would be Steve Wozniak, right? Just he put up with Steve Jobs somehow. Somehow he still seems to be a decent human with the wealth coming later. And it just seems like it'd be interesting to talk to him. Did he end up pretty happy without spiraling or unraveling as so many others seem to? Because he really did change the world in many positive ways. That's a name that kind of popped to mind first.
It's interesting. You're right. There are so many people that have gotten that immense wealth, and it just changes them. And it's a scary thing to see. But from what I understand, you're right. He has stayed very true to himself and has not changed. So that would be an interesting conversation. So wrapping this up, what do you see as the future of your industry?
Yeah, it feels like right now, looking ahead in the future, trying to crystal ball, it seems like a crossroads, like Bitcoin mining, a whole lot of electricity used, a whole lot of people buying GPUs at high prices, but did it make the world better? Did it produce a product that we could all benefit from rather than a few people making some money? So it feels a little like that with the huge, tremendous rise of AI, where I do see the value. Perplexity, I use more and more than Google these days, a little bit of ChatGPT as well. So I get it, but they're not profitable businesses yet. And when you hear things like Microsoft firing up nuclear plants to keep this going because they can get that permitted in a year or two, not wait around for the utilities for 5 years, that sickens me. But when I try to think of the positive part, maybe this is the wake-up call we need. We need our grid beefed up. We need to have all these little silos where Connecticut decided to opt out of a major wind project happening right in our New London, Connecticut. That's pretty sickening, whereas Massachusetts and Rhode Island will benefit. That kind of stuff. It's so short-sighted and sad to see. So why I'm saying this is because so much of my career, like 3 decades, were mostly focused on helping customers save energy in the data center. And then now you see this potential uptick where they're using this politically to say, the utility companies, we need a huge amount of money to upgrade our grid. And they're seeing this rise of AI as maybe their way to do that. You can't do that while impacting the customers, the consumers who already have high bills. And how do you do that fairly? So this is where justice, environmental justice all comes in, where it's just a head scratcher for me. This is stuff I'm not used to thinking about, but also good for me to stretch myself a bit. How do you solve it? I'm not sure, but I will say there is tremendous value in things like Perplexity, where it can thermostat wiring, zone damper controllers. It'll sift through an instruction manual and give me an answer while I was in my attic and I was getting frostbite after being there for 5 hours just trying to fix something. And I'm like, I found the answer. Like, ooh, this just saved me an hour or two. And I'm
Mhm.
freezing and I want to get this done. It's like 3 a.m. So I get it. I just don't quite see if this is too big a bubble. Will it be 2, 3 years from now? Will we regret firing up nuclear plants because now we found a way to do it with 1/10 the energy 3, 4 years from now, and then it was just silly? I don't
Mhm.
know. Because remember what I said at the beginning of this little discussion? We really only need a third of the energy to replace the energy needs of today. But if AI increases that substantially, maybe it turns out we now need half to try to keep,
Mhm.
you know, things under control with temperature rises. And I don't even, there's some polarizing words you could say there, but just look at graphs for the last 10,000 years of human history and look what the temperature's doing. Do we really want to
Right.
keep burning stuff to just go about our day-to-day lives? So I know those
Mhm.
are difficult comments, but as an IT pro who racked and stacked a whole lot of computer gear that burns tens of thousands of watts, but eventually less and less with every decade or so that goes by, I see a shrinking and a more increase of an efficiency from AMD and Intel. So that gave me some hope there. But then now the whole rise of the GPU and AI and a whole lot of watts for that, I don't know, there's huge segments of society that aren't going to see benefits. And that freaks me out a little for yet more upheaval, right? Wow, that
Yeah.
was a long-winded answer, but you got it.
It was
But
great
it's
though.
important.
You were preaching in my church, so
Yeah, and it's important stuff. It is where the future of the industry is going. Absolutely, it's a conundrum. It is a very difficult problem to solve, but it is the problem of our era, and I thoroughly agree with you.
Yeah.
So it is going to be a very interesting next 10, 20 years, seeing how things develop. But I agree with you. AI has a tremendous amount of value, but it has to be done carefully, and the grid is absolutely a challenge. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Just to wrap that topic up too, on the plus side, like YouTube, an algorithm. Some algorithms, people hear the word algorithm like a dirty word, but got to say, sometimes you watch one HVAC video about something and they get another one. It's okay, here's hot water store. Here's another way to heat and cool your home. My home has solar. It's got an excess of sun in the day. But storing that affordably for the heat pumps to run all night to make it through the dead of winter, that's a challenge. There are companies focused on that, and I love seeing that. This is not actually that difficult. We just don't have a lot of financial motivation for people to dive in
Right.
hard. And we're also like a good decade behind Europe here in the US, where they upcharge us for every heat pump here because they're barely efficient enough to run New England. It's embarrassing how far behind we are on that. But it's also good to learn, and YouTube and articles and stuff. It's been very, very helpful to the content people put out, sometimes for very little production value or money, and they do it anyway. Those are the ones that excite me the most, because sometimes they're really high value. It's okay, I'm okay with the algorithm pushing this video for me because it really helped me. That's the kind of video I produce sometimes. Some of them only have 100 views, some have 100,000. I don't know when I produce it what it's going to get. But the ones that feel best are the ones I couldn't find anywhere else on Google or AI or whatever. Figured something out, you're sharing with the world just because of the joy of it. And to me, what keeps me going and sharing the stuff I've learned in my last 2 years of renovating my 30-year-old house to make it way more efficient and all electric. I've learned a lot. And I enjoy
that's
that.
just a baby, a 30-year-old house.
Actually, now 34 years, but yeah, 32
We had
I
a
bought it, but yeah.
200-year-old house in
Whoa.
New England, so yeah.
No insulation. Yeah, there you go.
No,
Nope.
I had to rip out every
Nope.
wall and redo. Absolutely.
wow.
No,
Yeah, it was pretty wild. So,
Yep.
and I
Not
was
sure I'd
a
ever wanna do that.
serious historic preservationist, so like we weren't doing it with like new modern. I mean, we did use power tools. I wasn't like that crazy, but
Yeah.
there was a lot of things that I would not allow to come into the house because they don't jive well with old wood and old brick and all that. So
So we had to embrace the angles and the
Yeah.
nothing level, nothing plumb.
nothing plum.
Now
But fun.
with our country being blanketed by thick smoke regularly from Canada, that's really been eye-opening too. And my wife and I at that time were putting in solar and an ERV, a fresh air filtration system. So, oh my gosh, didn't really know we were preparing for this, but we had lots of fires from Canada 2 summers in a row. And then now recently one right in Connecticut burning quite heavily that a local fireman perished in. So that was pretty eye-opening
Oh,
for me.
wow.
And yeah, and then of course California, which it's hard to ignore what's going on
yeah.
right there here in January of
I know.
2025.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's a scary bit. But thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything you wanted to share before we wrap?
No, I'll just say, trying to end on a more positive note. Most of my posts are about things I've succeeded with, figured out. So I try to stay positive, and part of that positivity has been moving over to Blue Sky. So if someone wants to follow me, just search for Paul Braren, Braren on Blue Sky. You'll find me there more and more these days. And YouTube, which is actually called Tinker Try for the name of the YouTube channel. And then finally, tinkertry.com. So thank you again for this opportunity. You'll see 1,400 articles written over 14 years if you want to see my brain dump or learn more about me, including topics I didn't even touch upon today. I'm right about whatever I feel like it that week or day.
Well, that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. So thank you so much. I look forward to getting this out there and hearing from people of what they think. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.